Hello and welcome to Tawdry Tabletop. I am your host David, and today I am here to talk to you about how to get into the long and storied hobby of tabletop role-playing games. As you can see, I am well versed in various parts of the hobby. I've done it for quite a long time now, both as a player and as a game master, so I believe I'll be able to give you the basic intro. Okay. Maybe you've watched podcasts such as Critical Role, or you're just generally interested and you decided, I want to get into playing these games, but then you have no idea how to start, because it can be quite daunting even now. So, we'll talk first about the equipment, and then we are going to move into just general, things about the hobby. But first, what do you need? That's the first start. Okay, so the first thing you will need is some form of book. Okay, whatever system it is you want to play. For example, this is Legend of the Five Rings, you have Shadowrun, you have The One Ring. It really depends for you what it is you want to play. Now, of course, for most people, when they begin the role-playing hobby, the first option will be Dungeons and Dragons. Okay, because it's the Coca-Cola, it's the McDonald's.
Basic bitch,
if you would like to be that mean. However, it is the sort of default option. Now, there's nothing wrong with Dungeons and Dragons. I have played it myself, I have ran it myself for various groups. However, I would like to suggest to anyone coming into the hobby that there is, as this is only a small cross-section, okay, there is a much wider array to the hobby of Dungeons and Dragons, and because Dungeons and Dragons is so popular and so ubiquitous, people sometimes get drawn into only using Dungeons and Dragons for everything. They use the D20 system. I'll go over what that is specifically, for literally everything they can imagine. Instead of getting a Star Trek system, a Star Wars system, whatever sort of thing they want to get involved in, they will somehow try and create a shambling, grotesque monster of the D20 system to try and use it. Play Dungeons and Dragons if that's what you want to do. However, there is so much more, but you do need a rulebook. That's the first thing you need. So you've got a rulebook, okay? Then what else do you need? Got one of these. Got my bad boy. Am I ready to play? No, because the second thing you need is dice. Which is very important. Now, there are thousands of types of RPGs, there are thousands of types of dice. Okay, so for example here, I have some of my dice. This here is a sort of metallic set. Okay, you have dice that are made out of anything. Okay, metals, gems, wood, plastic, it does not matter as long as you have enough dice for whatever game it is you want to play. Now, as you probably already know, dice come in various sort of shapes. Okay, so for example here, if I look at this set, I have D20. Oh, that was a struggle to get these ones out. D12. Okay. A D10, you usually get two of these, one for a sort of tens and one of ones, so you can do a percentile dice, which is a tens dice and a ones dice.
It's easier than it seems.
It is easier than it seems. I'm making it much more complicated than it needs to be.
I usually do that.
This one here is a D8, okay. Then you've got your standard dice. You've seen this one before. It's a D6 because it's got 6 sides, and a D4. This one is what I like to call the caltrop. Okay, because if you stand in this, especially the metal ones, you're in for a bad time.
Beware.
Beware.
No, these days especially with all of these sharp dice.
Yes, with all of the metal dice, you are in for a bad time. So, what do the dice mean? Now, of course, the dice refer to numbers, and particularly number of sides. Okay, you've heard me talk about D20. There's various different types of dice systems, such as D100, D6, D8, D12. Basically, what that means is that whatever dice it refers to, such as a D20, it means that for the vast majority of skill checks in the system, you would use that particular dice. So in this case, you would use a D20 for most things, and then you'd use other dice for things like damage and various other effects. But that will tell you, just at a glance, what dice it is you need to use. Now, you don't need to have, fancy dice. You can get your basic plastic set and will absolutely do you enough. So as long as you have what's called an RPG set of dice, we've got these, these various sides, you can get more if you need to. Some RPGs, for example, the Fantasy Flight, Genesis, Star Wars, Legend of the Fire Rings, like to use these oddly, well, not oddly made, but they've got symbols on the dice. That's because Fantasy Flight love their odd dice for literally everything. They are quite fun, but you may find that other games do use other forms of dice rather than just sheer numerical systems. But it doesn't really matter, you just need whatever dice it is you need for the system, and the rulebook will tell you what it is you need. Okay, now, one thing I would highly suggest, okay, is that you get yourself, doesn't need to be this one in particular, but basically something to roll your dice on rather than your table. Okay, and why do I suggest that? Well, because, let's just do a wee sound check. Okay, if I break out this dice, roll it. Oh, that's noisy. So, let's do it instead of this. It's nice and quiet, it actually sounds quite good when it hits off that wood. You get these, you don't need to get a wooden one, you can get the fold-up ones quite cheaply. I mean, you could use even a plate, you could use, anything that will reduce the noise of the dice rolling. A mat would work, anything would work. Just have something that your players, or the other people on the table can roll the dice into, you can easily see them. It's not going to fall off the table, because then that becomes a whole thing of, do you take the roll as it is, do you re-roll?
If it's a good roll, you keep it.
No, you don't. You re-roll on the table.
Keep it.
Re-roll the table. So, okay, what else do we need? We've got our dice now, we've got our rule book. Okay, you do not need one of these, but they can be quite useful. This is a Game Master's screen, or Dungeon Master screen, depending on what system you're playing. Basically, Storyteller, Story Mother if you're playing Alien. It's basically a way for the Games Master, I'll just use that, to keep things hidden from the players, because obviously there needs to be some sort of suspense, some sort of mystery for the players, and that's what that's there for. You don't need it, you can use literally anything, but sometimes, for example it does come with a little rules reference for the Games Master, which can be quite useful for them. So, don't need it, but useful to have. So you've got your rule book, you've got your dice, you've got maybe a Dungeon Master screen, but you don't need it. Pencils, paper, general stuff, just
rubbers.
To make notes, and rubbers. I would suggest not using pen, okay, because you will have to change things, and it just makes it difficult. You can use, laptops, tablets, anything to replicate these things. I'm traditional, I'm an old Luddite. I like pen and paper, or pencil actually and paper, but whatever will work for you. Okay, so that's basically, obviously, a table, the equipment you need. Now, next, you need people. Okay, and I know for some of us in the hobby, that's the difficult part, that's when it starts to get tough. But, okay, in role-playing it is split between two sides. The Game Master, or Dungeon Master, or anything, and the players. Okay, so you will need both sides for the vast majority of RPGs to work. So let's go through what each of those are, and I will start first off with the players, because that's the easy part. The players are the people who obviously play the game. All they need to know are the rules and their characters, okay?
When to show up.
And when to show up, of course. That's the actual vastly more difficult part. You can know all the rules, but the second you say to your players as a GM, come here for 7 o'clock, you will find that they will get every array of times in the day, apart from 7 o'clock. Some will show up at 6 in the morning, some will show up at 6 at night, some will show up at 12 midnight.
A tip is to bribe people with food.
Bribe
if
people
you're
with
feeding
food,
them.
with snacks to make sure that they come. It does make it easier. But know when to be there, know the rules, know their character that they're going to play, and just be willing to have fun. Okay, that's what players need to do. So get a copy of the rulebook, either from the Games Master, from the table, or just go online and get a PDF version, sail the high seas, yo ho ho, and read the book, know how to play the elements of your character. If you're playing a magic character, you should know what your spells do, because don't rely on your Games Master to know every single spell in all the game.
They will hate you.
Because I've had to deal with that, and I do hate you so badly. Know how your character rules work. If you're doing something in particular, you should have a basic idea of how to do it. So that's nice and easy. Now, unfortunately, one of you, if you have a group of friends and you all want to play, one of you will need to take on the vaunted mantle of the Games Master. Now, I'm afraid to tell you, for that unlucky person, you will become like this wretch you see before you.
Herding cats.
As a forever GM, typically. What that means is, once you start, it's like Doritos, you cannot stop.
Isn't that Pringles?
Pringles, it is. It's Pringles. Once, I also do that with Doritos, to be fair, so it doesn't really matter.
Not that into Doritos.
But once you start GMing, typically you will find you cannot stop, and you'll become forever cursed to aimlessly wander the earth as a forever GM dealing with players.
Hating your friends.
You'll slowly become withered and dark and filled with hate at
Your
all the people around
friends
you.
will also try and annoy you.
Yes.
They will be Gnagenborns, gnome dragonborns.
And this is why I do not play Dungeons and Dragons anymore.
Especially not with me.
So, you need a Games Master. So what does a Games Master do? The Games Master is basically creates the game and is in charge of the game. They are the arbiter of the rules. If players disagree, if the player and the Game Master disagree, it is the Game Master who makes the final decision. Okay, it's up to them, okay, what is going on in the game, how the plot progresses, what the players can and cannot do, how NPCs, non-player characters, react to things that the players do, all up to the Games Master. So it's a lot to do. Okay, and unfortunately, someone's got to do it. I'm not going to lie. I'll go over it more in a separate video. Being a Games Master is actually good fun. But it does mean for you, for the Games Master, compared to the players, you have more upfront work to do. Whether it is creating your own adventure or getting an adventure book such as this one here, for example, the Darkening of Mirkwood for the One Ring, which is a sort of epic campaign. You get smaller ones, things like the Curse of Strahd for Dungeons and Dragons, various different types of books. But you either need to make your own adventure, make your own campaign, or to get a pre-bought one and then basically know it so that your players can play it. When you're done playing the game, you're then telling the players what's happening in the game. You're setting the scene, you're creating the theatre of the mind, and then you will tell the players what it is they can and cannot do. You will dictate, arbitrate what roles will be, what skills they can use. Obviously, you're listening to feedback from the players. You may change things, but it's a much more active role. Whereas for the players, it's more passive. They are consuming the game that you, as the Games Master, are creating. You're like the director of a movie, whereas the players are more just actors. Okay. So now you've got a GM. You have shanghaied one per person into being that. You've got the rest of the players, and you are now at the table. What do you do? Okay. Well, the simple thing is, okay, you have fun. All right. Now, the most important thing to remember about all role-playing games, about all of these books, all of these dice, everything. Session zero. Now, this is the thing. I'm an old man. You do not need to sit down and talk about the game beforehand. A session zero can be something as much as a group chat, where basically the Games Master will say, this is the game that I want to run, okay, here's the background, here's the setting, and here's the kind of characters I want you to make. Okay, and as players, it's important that you listen to this and you try and make things within that kind of framework, because if you try and go against what the Games Master is wanting to do, okay, you'll quickly find that's not going to work out well. It'll be a rocks fall and everyone dies type moment, okay? Or the GM will just quit and leave, one of the two. But for example, different games have different setup requirements. For example, something Legend of the Five Rings will require both the Games Master and the players to know a lot more about the setting and the sort of standards of Rokugani society, which is the setting of Legend of the Five Rings. There's a lot to it. It's a kind of magical, fictional Japanese setting, whereas it's going to be a lot more kind of reading to do on both ends before you can play, and characters have to fit into a particular mold depending on their clan and things like that. Whereas in something like, Masks, okay, which is about kind of teenage superheroes, you can be a lot more freeform in the characters that you create. You can do anything as long as it is, a superhero. It doesn't even need to be particularly teenaged. It just
And that's a D6 system, isn't it?
It's powered by the Apocalypse. Yep, it is a kind of D6 system. And yeah, it just depends on what you're wanting to play. Something, for example, like Vampire, obviously, you're going to be playing a vampire. But whatever the vampire is, is going to be up to you. The clan will somewhat dictate the general temperament, but it is more depending on what it is you want to do. But session 0, just a general chat, a group chat, anything to basically set up the game before you play, because the first session, should really just be about playing the game. Make your characters before you show up, get the GM's approval, have some feedback, and then you're good to go. So that's session 0. You're out at the table, you're now wanting to play. Rule 0, have fun. Okay? Everything here, the dice, the books, the plates, the tables, I don't know why I said plates, but the pencils, the pens.
He's thinking about the pizza.
I'm thinking about the snacks. It's all an abstraction, okay? Because what are you really doing? And at the end of the day, when you're playing an RPG, you are playing make-believe, like we used to do when we were kids, okay? The difference is that all of this, all the books, all the dice are basically there as abstractions to give it a structure. Because we all had those moments when we were kids and we'd start playing make-believe and you had that one kid who was like, no, I have a force field that could just negate everything. Okay, the rules are there to stop that from that happening, because there are still those guys, okay, they exist, and if you let them, they would do the same thing. But that's why it exists. So have fun. If a rule's not leading to a fun time, okay, get rid of the rule. Speak with your GM. If the GM agrees, that rule doesn't exist. Things like encumbrance, okay? Some people love that, they love keeping a track of what it is they're carrying. It makes it more realistic. Other groups, why? It doesn't really matter. If you want a more serious tone, if you want a less serious tone, again, have a discussion. You may end up disagreeing. That's just how it's going to work. But constant communication, and if everyone's on side to have fun, you're in a much more pertinent position.
And GM's word comes last.
No, GM's word.
First and last.
First and last, yes. But basically, the GM is not a dictator, okay? Their job is to work with the players. Again, that's why I say the director analogy. Because
friendly dictator.
Friendly, the benign, benevolent dictator. They want everyone to have a good time. But you have to remember that there's more stress on the GM, so try and treat them as well as you can.
Maybe bring them a present.
Bring them a present, bring them some snacks, bribe them,
Doritos.
Us GMs love being bribed. Anything we'll do quite nicely. Okay, so what I will do is I will leave off here, but remember you need core book, okay? I will usually say on it, for example, core rule book or something like that, or rule book. You can get some games may require more than one book. For example, here, Call of Cthulhu is made up of the Keeper rulebook and the Investigator rulebook. Okay, the Keeper rulebook is for the Games Master, the Investigator handbook is for the players. So you would need both in this instance, to properly play Call of Cthulhu. And same for Dungeons and Dragons, for example, that has 3 books: the Monster Manual, the Dungeon Master's Guide, and the Player Handbook. So just make sure that you research what books it is you need. For most RPGs, you can get away with one core rulebook. For others, there are differences. Make sure you have the book. Make sure you've got some dice, pens, paper, and you are good to go and have fun. Okay, this is David from Tawdry Tabletop signing off. Have a good day.
For real this time.